From the 22 News Plus studio, this is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of In Focus. I am your host, Patrick Berry, and today we are talking about one of my most favorite subjects. It's the game of hockey, and most importantly, the importance of the game of hockey here in Springfield, because in 2026, they will be celebrating 100 years of hockey in Springfield. I'm very excited today to be joined across the desk by one of Springfield hockey's most famous people, Bruce Landon. Bruce, thank you so very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You have a long and storied life in hockey. I think most people know you because you were the president general manager of Springfield hockey for 40 years?
A long time.
It was a long time. It was a long time.
Right.
But before that, you were a player.
Right.
You grew up in Canada. Let's talk a little bit about your life growing up in
Sure.
Canada as a hockey player.
Well, like most young kids, I grew up playing minor hockey up in my hometown of Kingston, Ontario, and was a goaltender and, was doing very well. And when I was about 14, I was scouted by the Montreal Canadiens, and I had a chance when I was at 14, probably when I was 12, but it was in a special tournament when I was 14. And they talked to me. They said, you have a couple opportunities. You can go to try to play in the OHL, which is the premier junior league in Canada.
Right.
Or I could go to the Western Ontario Junior B League, which is a very good league. I was 15 years old, got in a bus from Kingston and got on a bus all by myself and went 400 miles to Chatham, Ontario, and played in the Western Ontario Junior B League. And then after that year, I went to the Peterborough Petes, one of the well-known junior teams in Canada, and played 2 years in Peterborough under Roger Nielsen.
And you're still a teenager at this point.
Still a teenager.
Oh, wow.
So I was drafted in my second year with Peterborough Petes by the LA Kings in the 1969 draft. And along with Butchie Goring and a popular name people know.
Yeah.
Butchie and I were drafted the same year together.
Okay.
And the rest is history. I started my career here in Springfield, drafted by the LA Kings, and was sent to Springfield in 1969. And,
and the rest is history.
The rest is history, as they say.
So let me ask you, you were a goalie. That was your position. Why, going back as a young boy, did you take up goaltending?
I had no choice. I had an older brother. Basically had an older brother. He needed somebody to shoot at. He needed somebody to shoot at. And whether it was frozen socks, a frozen rubber ball, or a hockey puck out on the street, that's what I had to do. So, yeah, I was his target, basically. And he was a very good hockey player, could have turned pro as well, but circumstances, he couldn't do it. But, yeah, and then I showed up at the rink one day. I was, I think, probably 10 years old. And I was playing on a church team, and our goaltender didn't show up, so they stuck me in the nets. And I remember had green goalie pads, and they stuck me in the nets when I was about 10 or 11, and stayed there, my whole career.
So, hockey has been very good to you.
Yes, it has. Yeah.
It is, and you hear that from a lot of athletes, no matter the sport, is they always appreciate how good the sport has been to them. Have you ever considered moving back to Canada, to your hometown, or is the Springfield area home?
I've been married going on 55 years. My wife would divorce me if I even brought that up. So we, the first year we were married, went back to my hometown, Kingston, for one summer to live, and then we came back down here and built a house. So no, I'm a Western Mass guy. Got my U.S. citizenship a long time ago, and my only relative back in Canada is my older brother, still alive. But no, I have no interest in going back to Canada.
You've been here long enough?
Long enough. This is my home.
And your kids were born and raised here?
Born here. I got grandchildren not too far away from me, so it's great. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you came to Springfield as a draftee of the Los Angeles Kings in the late 60s. You started in Springfield as a goalie. Was it your first 2 seasons you won the Calder Cup?
No, the first year, 1969, we got beat out in the finals by Buffalo. Buffalo had an AHL team at the time, and Buffalo beat us in the finals. And then the next year, the 70-71 year, we won the Calder Cup. And I had gotten hurt that year, and Billy Smith, who actually was my roommate, his first year pro, my second year pro, when I got hurt, he took over, and Billy went on to a Hall of Fame career. And as I told Billy last time I saw him, if I hadn't got hurt, you would have never become a Hall of Famer. So that's sort of a standard joke between the two of us. But so we won it in 70-71. So finals the first year, 69, my first year pro, and then we won it the second year.
So And it was about 20 years later when the Springfield team won again in the early 90s.
Yeah, they won it. They won it actually a Calder Cup, and I think it was 74, 75 year when they were playing over at the Civic Center when Eddie Shore took the control of the team away from the Los Angeles Kings, and they won a Calder Cup then. And then we won back-to-back Calder Cups in 89, 90, 90, 91. At this time, I was the general manager. I had retired as a player in 77. I'd gone from the LA Kings organization to 5 years with the New England Whalers, and then retired in 77. Went into the front office in 77, December 77, and then stayed on and was general manager in 82. And we won back-to-back Calder Cups in 89, 90, 89, 90, 90, 91. Under two different affiliations, which is rare.
Interesting. Going back in time, so we're celebrating 100 years of hockey in Springfield. A lot of people know the name Eddie Shore. How instrumental was he in the success of hockey in this market?
Well, if it wasn't for Eddie, there's no hockey in Springfield. I mean, because Eddie took over the ownership, played for the old Springfield Indians, and owned the team at the same time over the Coliseum, ran the Coliseum, owned the team. And if it wasn't for Eddie, I mean, Eddie was one who had hockey way back, in those early days. And then Eddie eventually sold the franchise, sold the team to his lawyer, George Leary, who I ended up going to work for. George was Eddie's lawyer, and Eddie sold the team to him. I believe that would have been, try to guess the year on that, but it was around 80. Would have been before that, I guess. Trying to remember here, but he sold the team, and George then kept it, and then he sold it to Peter Cooney in 1982. And I had actually hired Peter as our broadcaster in 1979.
Okay.
Knew he was quite a wealthy young man when I hired him, but he bought the team in 82 from George Leary, and then he sold it, and then we started the Falcons, and now the Thunderbirds.
We are up on our first commercial break. There's plenty more to talk about when it comes to hockey history here in Springfield, so stay with us. We'll be back after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of InFocus. I'm your host, Patrick Berry. Across the desk from me today is Bruce Landon, the well-known longtime president and general manager of hockey here in downtown Springfield. Bruce, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure,
appreciate
Patrick.
Your time. Hockey, minor league hockey has changed dramatically from 100 years ago in the 1920s to where we are in the 2020s. What do you think has been the biggest change?
Well, the change at the AHL level is there's more NHL-owned teams in the American Hockey League now. Back when we started the Falcons, for example, in '94, before that, there were a lot of independently owned teams. Springfield was independently owned, Syracuse was independently owned, and at one time it was a sort of a 50-50 split across the league between NHL-owned teams and independently owned teams. The move has gone the other way. Of course, you've got 32 teams now, so you've got a number of teams now owned by NHL teams, and you got less teams owned by independent operators like we do here in Springfield.
So the Springfield Thunderbirds are independently owned, even though they're an affiliate of the St. Louis Blues.
They pay an affiliation fee to the St. Louis Blues, which is something people aren't aware of. They pay a lot of money, and for that they get players and a coach and a training staff. Back years prior to that, when we were running the Falcons, and before that with the Indians, we used to pay for our own trainer, our own equipment manager, and the NHL team would put the players in. But the roles have changed a little bit, I think, for the better for Springfield, because Nate Costa, who does a wonderful job as president of Thunderbirds, really concentrates primarily on the ticket and the business side of the operation. So they've built a big staff, concentrating on marketing, social media, promotions, and packing the place. Nate doesn't have to worry too much. He can worry about it, but he can't do much about the hockey side. That's completely up to the St. Louis Blues to put a team on the ice. And so Nate can be upset, certainly, if they don't have a good team, which they're struggling a little bit on the ice, but they're still drawn well, which is a credit to Nate, the ownership, and their staff. But it's the dynamics have changed a little bit from the independent ownership to the NHL-owned teams.
So during your tenure, you oversaw hockey operations too, not just the business side of running a team in Springfield. You dealt with player personnel.
Yeah, I used to have to deal with players. If we had a couple injuries on a Saturday night, I'd be on the phone at midnight, 2 a.m, trying to find a player in the East Coast League to call up to fill a roster. Maybe for a Sunday game, you got to know all the agents that had American League players
Right.
under contract or East Coast League guys that they worked with, and it had a list of the agents you would call. And so you're constantly working on the hockey side. The years we won the Calder Cup, I had called up a couple players. Greggy Parks come up from Johnstown on the recommendation of another player, end up being a phenomenal player in the playoffs for us. So you're a little bit more involved in the hockey side. You work closely with the NHL assistant general manager who would oversee the team, but I would work closely with the various AGMs we worked with. And I had worked with a number of affiliations, probably too many, and we flipped quite a bit for different reasons. People always ask, why did you flip affiliations so much? Part of it was financial, because some of them want more money than we could afford to pay at the time. The other was you'd like to think that maybe the grass was a little greener, that the other team, I remember going to Tampa Bay and signed a 5-year deal with Tampa Bay because Jay Feaster was a good friend of mine who ran Tampa Bay. Jay promised me we're going to have a good team in Springfield. He tried hard, but we failed. So we dumped Tampa Bay and we went to another one. So you bounced around. Now what Thunderbirds have done, Paul Picknelly, the majority owner, and his group, and Nate, they've locked in a 5-year deal with St. Louis Blues. So that gives them stability.
Right.
We never had a lot of stability because some of the NHL teams were always looking for more money, or where could they go that might be a little better place for their players. So
I have to imagine the NHL side of it is looking for stability too. A good environment where they can grow their players.
They want to develop their players, and that's all they really. I shouldn't say that's all they care about, but primarily that's what they care about in Springfield. I mean, they want to win, and as I've told Nate and others who want to listen to me, all the NHL general managers will always say the right thing to you. We want to win in Springfield. We want to give you a good team. We want to make sure you're competitive. Down deep, they want to, but the number one thing for them is developing players. And if they can go through a year and develop 2, 3, 4 players, then it's worked for them. If you have the right working affiliation, and I think St. Louis over time will show they're certainly a good affiliate. This has been a tough year for the Thunderbirds, but there's still a lot of hockey left to go, and all it takes is a little winning streak to get back in the playoff hunt again. So, but they've got a marriage together, and they have to find a way to make it work.
I think back not too long ago in the past, the Springfield was in the Calder Cup Finals.
Yes,
they lost, but that was a great season.
That was a great year, and it's one of those runs that you look forward to. They don't come along very often. You get an opportunity to win a Calder Cup. It's not easy because of the talent and also the number of teams in the league now. But it's when you get that opportunity, and I was lucky enough to be involved in a couple of them as general manager, it's the fun things. That's what the fans want. You want to be in the Calder Cup Finals. You want the players competing, but it's hard to get there.
Like any sport, I think of baseball, the Dodgers back to back, Florida Panthers for hockey back to back. That is not easy to do.
Well, it's not. And you look at Florida this year, they're right now, as of today, they're out of a playoff spot.
Exactly.
So it's tough, and it's very tough, the American Hockey League, to win. We won back-to-back. I think Hershey had won back-to-back back at some point in time. It's tough to get even to the finals, let alone to win a championship.
It's interesting. The 1959 through 62 Springfield Indians won 3 straight. It's the only AHL team to have ever done that, and they are considered the most dominant.
Dominated, and there was, I think, 6 teams in the league maybe at that time. There wasn't very many teams, but they dominated. They had stability. The players didn't go up and down very often. Now you see a lot of change. I just saw today that one of the Thunderbirds players just been called to St. Louis. Hugh McGing's gone up. So you see a lot of movement back in that 59 to 62. Those players played in Springfield. That was their team, and for 3 years, a lot of the same players were here. So that was a tremendous run.
Create stability.
I don't think you'll see that again. I really don't.
I think of hockey and basketball very similar in the respect that players get to know how each other play. Baseball it's sort of an individual sport, but teams like basketball and hockey, you learn who's on your line, and how that person plays. So when you have that stability, you create better teams.
And teams at the American League level and in Springfield, every day you could have a different player in practice or different line mates in practice.
Exactly.
It's just goaltenders. It's hard. It's very hard to win at the American League level. And back again, a number of years ago, the NHL teams used to sign 5 veterans. You're allowed 5 veterans on your team. That would give you some stability. The reason, we won back-to-back Calder Cups, but we had some 4 or 5 key players that then you built your younger players, your first and second, and then your third and fourth year players around those older guys. That gave you the stability. And for me, it's all about goaltending too. You don't win without great goaltending. And,
absolutely.
And the Thunderbirds had phenomenal success when Ellis, I believe, was their goaltender. Now he's with Buffalo.
Right.
When we won back-to-back Calder Cups in 89 and 90, both years, our MVP was our goaltender. Kay Whitmore one year and Jeff Hackett another year. So you need the goaltending.
Well, even going back further, your first couple of years, Billy Smith. Went on to he was a great Islander goal.
Yeah. Great Islander goaltender, Hall of Famer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Started his career here in Springfield.
We are up on our second commercial break. Stay with us. Plenty more of hockey history to talk about.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of In Focus. I'm your host, Patrick Berry. Today, we are talking about 100 years of history of hockey in downtown Springfield. Well, I shouldn't say downtown Springfield, in Western Mass. Sitting across from me today is Bruce Landon, the longtime part owner and general manager and president of hockey in Springfield. I can't say a specific team name because, Bruce, under your tutelage, there were multiple names, right?
Yeah.
Most recently, really kind of when you transitioned out of the hockey world into enjoying retirement, was the switch from the Falcons to the Thunderbirds. Walk me through that change, because that's been about 10 years now.
Yeah, well, we'll go back a little before that. The ownership group that I'd put together there back, we wanted to sell the franchise. They wanted to sell the franchise, and I had to try and find. I was given a few weeks to try and find somebody to buy the franchise.
A few weeks.
Yeah, they basically said, "Let's see if we can't get it sold." And I, quite honestly, went through, I think, 22 different scenarios to try and sell the franchise, working closely with our lawyer at the time. And I couldn't find a buyer for Springfield. In other words, I had some people on the phone, the Vancouver Canucks, New Jersey Devils, a number of independent, wealthy people that lived not in this area that wanted to buy the franchise, but they wanted to move it out of Springfield.
Right.
And there was no way I was going to let the team move out of Springfield. So I turned down a couple offers that were fairly good offers, would have been decent offers for the ownership group and the return on their investment, but there would have been no hockey in Springfield. And I wasn't going to let that happen.
Before that, there was a team that left Springfield and went to Worcester, right?
That was what happened, why we became the Falcons. In 94, Peter Cooney sold it to Roy Bowe, who an investor in Worcester. So the Indians went to Worcester. And that's when we started the Falcons in 94, me and my longtime friend and Wayne LaChance. And then we put a small group together and started the Falcons in 94. And then I flipped it in 2002 and I stayed on. And Wayne got out. I brought in Mass Mutual and Joe Canby and Lyman Wood and a few other people. And then that group decided we wanted to sell. It got down to, to be honest, quite honestly, the final strokes where I either was given an ultimatum, sell it. Doesn't matter. Whoever wants to buy it, let them buy it. And I don't want to make this wrong. The group at the time were still interested in keeping it in Springfield, but if there was nobody interested in Springfield and buying it at the time, then we had to sell the franchise. So I was introduced to Charlie Pompey at a golf tournament, and Charlie said no when I first met with him, and then he called me back up. He said, "Let's talk." And he said, "What do you think we can get the franchise for?" And we talked back and forth, and Charlie ended up buying the franchise. And I stayed on as part owner, still limited ownership group, and Charlie was the majority owner and owned the franchise, and he owned it in a different way than what I was used to dealing with. Charlie had made a lot of money in the steel business and tried to run the franchise a little bit like the steel business, and it was very difficult for me working for Charlie, with Charlie. Charlie spent most of his winter in Florida. His daughter came up, got involved in our marketing. But Charlie was a tough guy to work for, and we just didn't see eye to eye. And I realized that it wasn't going to work for me, so I decided to call it a career. And I stayed on 1 year, sort of the hockey operations side of things. And his daughter then was named president. And Sarah was a wonderful young lady, but she wasn't cut out to be the president of a hockey team in the American Hockey League. And Charlie walked in the office one day, and he says, "I sold the franchise." And that was the first time that I heard about it. normally he had a pretty good pulse of what was going on, but because he was not in the area and he was working mostly out of Florida, he sold the franchise, and I was very upset, to be honest with you, because he didn't give me a chance to see, okay, can I try again to see someone local? So he sold it to Arizona, Phoenix, and so then Paul Picknelly called me up and he said, what's going on? And he had also spoken to the president of the league, Dave Andrews, and to try and find out how could we keep hockey in Springfield. And at that time, the only way to do it was to purchase the Portland Pirates franchise that was for sale. Okay. Dave Andrews, the president of our league at the time, made it very clear there was not going to be any more expansion teams, so you had to buy the Portland Pirates. So I helped work with Paul closely and his group he was putting together, and we bought the Portland Pirates franchise and moved it into Springfield, which then became the Thunderbirds. I stayed on for 1 year. Paul asked me to stay on for a year as a consultant, basically, to sort of until Nate and his crew got entrenched in the area and know what to do. So, yeah.
What was I don't think a lot of people understand that the AHL home office is right here in Springfield.
Right.
NHL home office is in Toronto. Right. AHL is here in Springfield. How involved was the AHL home office in keeping hockey in Springfield?
They really, at that time, were not too involved. It was really up to the independent, up to me as working on behalf of my partners to try and find a buyer for the team in Springfield. I mean, I would consult with Dave Andrews. Dave was very instrumental in when Charlie sold the team in putting Paul Picknelly in touch with the people who own the Portland franchise. So Dave was very instrumental at that time. Charlie sold the franchise, and, we were having some really tough years in the ice. And one of the things people think of the Falcons, they didn't have any attendance. Well, we got to go back, because when we bought the Falcons in '94, attendance in the '93 season was in the high twos, and a lot of those were comp tickets. Well, we were able to build the franchise up to an attendance average of about 52 or 5,300. So we took it one step, and the Thunderbirds have come in and just blown the roof off and have taken another step. And nobody's happier than me about that, because it proves all along that hockey can work here in Springfield if everything comes together, the right ownership group, the right staff, and Nate and the Thunderbirds are doing the right thing.
And hockey in Springfield is an economic driver, too, to the area.
Absolutely.
And not just to Springfield, it's the whole area.
Well, you get 6,000 people downtown, and on a Saturday night, Friday night, there's that economic spinoff to the bars, the restaurants, and, that's what it's all about, and Springfield, I think, realized how important it is to have that franchise in Springfield and stay in Springfield. And what makes me feel good is I worked a lot of years trying to make sure that the hockey did stay in Springfield. I feel pretty comfortable it's here to stay forever.
Absolutely. We've only got about a minute or so left. I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the move from the Eastern States Coliseum to the Springfield Civic Center. You were involved in that, right?
Well, not really, no.
Oh, okay.
No, it moved over. The Civic Center was built in '72. Okay. I had gone on to play I was still playing hockey at the time with the Whalers, so we went to '72, but what happened there, Patrick, was the fans of the old Coliseum were different. They were hockey fans. There weren't as many.
It was an old barn.
It's an old barn. Stomp your feet, shake, rattle, and roll, and free parking, acres of free parking. And when they went over to the Civic Center in '72, it was a beautiful facility, the brand new Civic Center. People just didn't want to cross over the river. And I still talk to people today that said, "Oh, I used to go to the Coliseum, but I never went to the Civic Center." That's obviously changing now, but I'm going back to '72. So they really struggled. If you look at some of the attendance figures in the early years of the Civic Center, they were horrible. And then George Leary brought the team back to the Coliseum to try and keep hockey going again. Of course, he also had the concession rights to the Coliseum, and that's where the money is in the food business. So, and then it moved back to Springfield, and now they're, like I said, Nate's doing a great job, and they're drawing well, and they're going to continue to draw well.
Absolutely. Bruce, we are unfortunately out of time. Thank you so very much for giving me your time. Talk a little bit about your history in hockey and the history of Springfield hockey.
Thanks, Patrick. It's been fun.
Thank you.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.